Still in the silence. Yet in this complete silence there exists God's greatest activity. Again, I am undisturbed, and complete silence is all about me. Now the radiance of this light spreads to God's vast universe, and everywhere I know there is God-conscious life. Again I say fearlessly, I am God. I am silent and unafraid. I lift the Christ high within me and sing God's praise. In the tones of my music, inspiration hums. Louder and clearer with each new day, inspiration is lifting my conscious thought until it is attuned to God's rhythm. Again I lift the Christ high and give close ear that I may hear the glad music. My keynote is harmony, and the theme of my song is God, and God seals my song as truth. Behold, I am born anew. A Christ is here. I am free with the great light of your Spirit, God my Father. Your seal is placed upon my forehead. I accept. I hold your light high. God my Father, again I accept. As Jesus ceased speaking, a dazzling ray of pure white light shot out from the center of the solar part of his body. This beam of light extended down the canyon some distance to where the gorge made an abrupt left turn, just ahead of the place where the advanced group of horsemen were riding. At the point where this light beam terminated, a great barrier like a stone wall seemed to rise instantly, and great darts that appeared like flaming arrows shot out from this barrier. The advancing horses stopped so suddenly in their mad forward dash that they unseated a number of their riders. Many of them paused for a moment with their heads and forefeet in the air, then turned and bolted down the canyon completely out of control. When they reached the advanced ranks of the main band, these riders that had not been unseated attempted to control their horses, but to no avail. These, as well as the riderless horses, plunged on and into the front ranks of the moving band. Here the movements of the front ranks were checked, while the ranks in the rear, not realizing their danger, came on and surged over those in advance, until the canyon below us was a seething mass of men and horses. For an instant all was a dead calm, save for the wild screams of frightened men and mad horses, where the wild stampede of the advance riders had clashed with the forward columns of the main band. There a terrific scene was taking place. The riderless horses, entirely free from restraining hands, had plunged headlong into and over the advance ranks, unseating many more men, and they with their ungoverned mounts added to the confusion. The horses began rearing, plunging, and screaming, as only dumb animals can in a moment of uncontrolled and violent fright. This mad melee was communicated through the massed horde in the canyon below us. Suddenly we saw men draw their short swords and slash wildly in every direction. Others drew their firearms and began shooting at men and horses in an attempt to clear the way for an escape. It soon developed into a battle of the survival of the fit. It ended in a mad dash for liberty by those who were fortunate enough to escape the shambles, leaving the gorge cluttered with great heaps of dead and wounded men and horses. We hurried down to give what aid we could to the wounded. All the inhabitants and our friends joined us. Messengers were sent out far and wide for assistance. We worked feverishly through the night until after sunup the next morning. As rapidly as we were able to extricate the wounded ones from the terrible debris, Jesus and our friends would take them in hand. When the last man was cared for, we returned to the lodge for breakfast. Much to our surprise, as we entered, we found the black bandit talking to Emil. It was the first time that any of us were conscious that Emil had been present. He saw our look of wonderment and said, "That will keep until later." After the meal was finished, we walked outside with the chief, and he told us that Emil and himself had come upon the man seriously wounded and unable to move, as he was held down by his fallen horse. They had freed him and carried him to the temporary shelter, where he was made as comfortable as possible. Then they had called our hostess and turned him over to her care. After his wounds were dressed, he asked if she would ask her God to show him what to do to be like her. He also asked her to teach him how to pray. She asked him if he wished to be whole and well, and he replied, "Yes, wholly like you." She answered, "Now that you have asked for wholeness, your prayer is answered. You are completely whole now." The man lapsed into a deep slumber. At midnight, when our chief made his rounds, he found that the wounds had completely closed, and there was not a scar left. The man arose, dressed, and volunteered to assist in the rescue work. We also saw a great number that we thought were just slipping into the great shadow, restored completely. Some would cringe in terror at the approach of our friends, so much so that it became necessary to separate them from the others. After the rescue work was finished, the Black One, as we called him, went about among his wounded associates, doing all he could to alleviate their fears. Many seemed like animals caught in a trap, fearing that a terrible death by torture awaited them, as that was the sentence meted out to them through the law of that land, should a bandit be captured. So definitely had this belief become fixed in their minds that they never responded to the kindness bestowed upon them. They feared they were being nurtured back to health so that the torture would be of greater duration. All were finally healed of their wounds, although a few lingered for months, evidently thinking they were delaying the day of torture. The Black One later organized all of the wounded who would join him into a protective unit against further raids, and also induced many of the inhabitants to join this unit. From that time on, we were later informed the bandit groups never again attempted to raid that district. Later, 2 of our expeditions passed through that territory on their way to the Gobi. This man with his followers conducted them safely through his own district and the adjoining district, a distance of over 400 miles, and neither he nor his followers would accept any compensation for that service. We have been told many times that he has become a great power for good throughout the district, giving his entire life freely to the people without remuneration. Next chapter. By noon on the second day, the wounded had all been cared for, and we made a last survey to make sure that there were no more wounded alive among the debris. On our way to the lodge for lunch and much-needed rest, one of the party voiced the thought which had been uppermost for hours in all our minds. Why this terrible Holocaust, this destruction of life? We were tired to the very marrow of our bones, and were completely floored by the shock. The brunt of the rescue work, especially in the early hours, had fallen to our lot, as the inhabitants had stood in such mortal terror of these bandits that it was very difficult to persuade them to lend assistance, even after we had freed many from the entangled horses. The villagers could see no reason why they should assist in saving the lives of those who were attempting to take their lives. Many of them have a deep aversion to touching any dead thing. Had it not been for our friends, the inhabitants would have left the scene immediately, never to have returned. As it was, we were weary and heartsick, having undergone the most terrible experience of our whole lives. We arrived at the lodge, refreshed ourselves, and sat down at the table completely unnerved. Shortly the food began to appear. We were all alone, our chief having accompanied 1 or 2 of our friends, and Lin Chu, the Black One,